Hello, I'm Kads, and welcome back to the Free-to-Play review. It is definitely starting to feel like the holiday season. Decorations are outside way too soon, and the temperatures are most certainly dropping, at least where I live. But most importantly of all, we have some wintry events to look forward to in Raid Shadow Legends, specifically, at least for the next month or so, the entire month of December, the Yuletide themed events. Now, of course, we're not going to be covering all of these various types of events going on featuring this. Our focus is, of course, as the title would suggest, on the Yuletide Titan event, the fourth iteration of a Titan event in the game. So given that, I assume most of you do know how these Titan events work, but in case you are new to the channel or you don't know or you're less familiar with these types, the way it works is that you get various points, in this case they're called snow points, from various events and tournaments, and you can accrue up rewards here based on how far you can get or how many you can acquire. So in this case, there's 5 different tiers, let's call them, of milestones, coming with an ancient shard, some gems, stuff like that, a void shard, some energy, Plarian points, nothing really exciting. Milestone 3 is where it really starts to get good. Lesser oil is really good, immortal soul coins are good, chaos ore, primal shard, and then some of the big kahunas, 100 greater oil is a lot, 100 gems is good, 500 energy is excellent. Immortal soul stone, immortal soul essence, sacred shard of course, and if you could get all the way out and maximize it with milestone 5, then you can get even more oil, superior oil, which is really good, higher tier chaos ore, good amount of soul coins, legendary tome, mythical tome, and of course the big kahuna, the tagline of this event, a void legendary champion, specifically being Tormin the Cold. Now, first off, I know a lot of people might have mixed feelings about Tormin the Cold. Is he good? Is he trash? I would say he's probably a solid like B into the A tier. He's definitely fallen out of like platinum arena meta in more recent years just because once you see him, he's pretty easy to counter as long as you have some sort of cleanser with block debuffs, and you can deal with the freezes. But he's also seen somewhat of a resurgence with the advent of Live Arena, where he can be a very, very good counter pick if you know that your opponent, or you can see that your opponent, is kind of going all in on a speed comp with a lot of buffs that don't include block debuffs, of course. Then you can pick Tormin as kind of a counter pick and kind of ruin or disrupt their approach by just landing a bunch of freezes with his passive. And of course, he's most popularly run in a stun set, but it could also be a provoke set or a day set. I've seen that a few times, which is weird, but it definitely works, or it can work. But definitely one of these CC sets is the way to go on your Tormin. Or some people go damage Tormin if you want to get some damage out of him, just because, you know, you're going to get a lot of counterattacks, you're going to get a lot of freezes, and he can hit decently hard. So a couple of ways you can build him. I would say he's still quite useful, or he has his niche in the meta as kind of a counter pick still to the speed meta. So he can be helpful to a lot of people, especially if you want to progress in tag team arena. You're seeing all those Arbiter speed teams with the Kymar and the Madame Saris, the standard cleave. Well, you throw your Tormin in there, and there's a pretty good chance that when the Arbiter takes her turn and puts increased attack, you freeze a lot of the people on the team. So he's a very, very, very solid counter speed meta champion. And so the skeptics out there are probably thinking, well, what's the catch? Why would they just give out a free void legendary? Well, of course it's not free, right? Because it will take effort in events and tournaments that are going to be live over the next month or so. I think it goes from the December 1st to the 25th. And an important thing to note is that to get Tormin, it does require 2,000 points overall. However, you will accrue 500 points if you log in daily for the 25 days that it's running, because I believe you get 20 points per day, so a total of 500 over the entire duration of the event. So that's a free 500 just for logging in every day, just like you normally do. It comes in your daily free pack as an addition. It doesn't replace anything. And so effectively, you only need to get 1,500 points if you want to get Tormin. But it gets even better, because the maximum number of points from all sources is 2,500 points, meaning that between all the events and tournaments, you can skip 500 points and still get all the way out to Tormin. But if you do feel along the way that that's not achievable, or some events are just out of scope, like shard events, for example, which we'll talk about a bit later, then perhaps you can lower your expectations or lower your goal and say, instead, I'm going to go for 1,400 and go for the sacred shard, which then means that you could skip 1,100 points, for example. So you can kind of pick and choose how you want to approach this, how far you want to go. And I might throw a poll up there on the community tab just to see how far people think they're going to try and go for this, just to kind of get a gauge of what you guys typically do for Titan events. So what are my thoughts on the Titan event? They're pretty much the same as they've always been. I think it's a great opportunity to get air quotes free rewards just for doing things that you already do in the game, running dungeon tournaments, tournaments or running dungeons during tournaments, doing events that are specific to the Yuletide Titan event in this case, stuff like that. I like that the top reward, well, there's two things that I like. I like that the top reward is something different. It's a Void Legendary champion who's usable for a lot of people, as I described earlier. But also, if you really go ham, you still walk away with a Legendary Tome and a Mythical Tome. So you're not punished, or they didn't replace it by something worse. They just added something on top that's better. But more importantly, the Sacred Shard in this case is a lot lower than the Void Legendary or Tormin. And so you could really opt to just go for Milestone 4 and walk away with the Sacred Shard if you're not too fussed about going all the way out to the maximum here. So you can kind of pick and choose and plug and play how you want to approach this, and I think the flexibility is really nice because it gives a little bit of power back to the players. And then of course I also like that you can skip 500 points. Normally the ways these have worked, at least the previous two, is that they offered, or the last milestone was at 1500 and there was a total of 1750 from events and tournaments, meaning that you could skip 250 points, but in this case you could skip 500, which just gives, again, a little bit more flexibility to the players. But of course the bad part of it is that it's going to require extra effort, so you're going to have to participate in events that you might want to skip in between fusions, like artifact enhancements or dungeon divers, stuff that you typically don't really want to go out of your way to do. You will have to go out of your way to do it if you want to go, at least if you want to get to the higher milestones here. And of course the most controversial of all is that yes, you're probably going to have to pull some amount of shards in order to get all the way out to the higher milestones. Shard pulls are part of events and tournaments, and thus they will be associated with this event. So as you probably can already guess, my plan is to go all in, all the way out, so I can get myself Tormin and use him in the ways that I described. And as far as a recommendation goes, I say go as far as you feel that you possibly can go. Don't go out of your way necessarily in terms of spending money if you don't have the money to spend, or you don't have the shards to pull, etc., stuff like that. You don't have the resources. Don't go out of your way to get it unless you're really keen on getting all the way out to milestone 4 or 5. But I would try to skip as few events in the beginning as you possibly can, because again, that just gives you more flexibility as you get to the later events, and you can start to pick and choose which of those you don't want to do. And speaking of the events, to start it off, I would be remiss if I did not mention the Summon Rush going on right now, which is one of the kickoff events for the Yuletide Titan event. And I've seen some mixed reviews on this. I've seen some people kind of unhappy that they're starting it off with shard pulls. What does that mean? Are there going to be a bunch of shard pull events for this, and that's the only way you're going to be able to get Tormin? And to that, I would say yes, to a degree. There is precedent for it, though, because there is typically one bonus summon rush or summoning event associated with all of the Titan events. That's been the trend this entire time, so it's not entirely new. To be more specific, the UDK birthday Titan event had a summon rush in the middle of the week, but it didn't have any boosted champions, no 10x, no anything like that, and you had to get 3,000 points, 6 sacreds or equivalent in void shards, primals, whatever. But it did offer some pretty decent rewards alongside of it, with that being like immortal soul coins and stuff like that, eternal soul coins, a couple of soul stones. The most recent one, the Halloween Titan event, was a little bit different in that it was an extension of the summit rush for Timothy the Fool. So during his fragment summon, some Halloween points were offered above the champion fragments at 3,000 at a milestone of 3,500. That's how far you had to go if you wanted to get all of the Halloween points from that particular summon rush. And in this case, you can see that the milestone is going to be 4,100 in order to get all 300 of the snow points being offered for this particular summon rush. And this is the part where people start freaking out and saying, well, the milestone started at 3,000, then it went up to 3,500, and now it's at 4,100, so it's going to keep increasing indefinitely forever, which is probably not the case. That's just not historical precedent, although the trend is increasing. But I think there's been a difference between each of these different types of Titan events. Again, let me reiterate that the amount you could skip is doubled, so 500, meaning that technically you don't have to do this summon rush at all. You would just be using up 300 of your 500 buffer, but you could make that gamble, make that choice, and that is one way to avoid having to pull shards here. But I also think the higher milestone is warranted in this case because you are going to be walking away potentially with a void legendary. And by comparison, 4,100 points is around 35 void shards, which means that you'd be spending 35 void shards in order to potentially guarantee yourself a Tormin the Code, or more importantly, just a void legendary at all. And 35 voids is a lot cheaper than trying to get a void legendary outright, or even you could just do 8 sacreds, whatever you want to do, whatever shards you want to pull. The point is, think of this more like a Tormin fusion, so to speak. And obviously Tormin was a fusion many years ago before I even started playing. But if you think of it that way, you're spending a few shards to guarantee yourself a champion of a certain caliber. And once again, if that does not feel like something you want to invest your resources into, then aim for a lower milestone and walk away with whatever reward is your target. The other difference relative to the previous one, specifically the UDK one that I mentioned that basically didn't have any boosted summons going on, is that this one also features a progressive chance event going on for certain champions, and we can't see it here, I guess. But for like the non-void shards, you have these assortment of champions: Valkyrie, UDK, Archbishop Pinthroy, Borgar the Elder, King Galkabar, Helikath, as far as non-void legendaries. Then do it in the Runic and Miscreated Monster for the epics. And you only have to pick one this time, which I guess is good for the people that didn't want multiple champions in their selected summons. So that's a little bit better. We've talked about my thoughts about progressive chance events in a previous free-to-play review. If you want to check that out, it's in the card above. And so I'm not going to rehash that. But I do think it's a pretty good system, and it's an improvement as far as having a base rate of 15x, which is a step in the right direction as far as summoning rates. So that's the non-void champions. We can quit that. And then for the void champions, you can see here that we have Warlord, one of the best PvP champions in the game, and then Sulfurion, a really, I think not necessarily underrated, but just not talked about champion, maybe because a lot of people don't have him. He's a void legendary, but one of the best Hydra DPS champions in the game, and then a couple of cool void epics alongside them. And I say all of this to acknowledge the fact that the milestone is the highest we've ever seen for a special or bonus summon rush relative to Titan events, but there's also a lot more being offered in the form of the progressive chance event, as well as the chance or opportunity to guarantee yourself a void legendary champion. So that's going to do it for the free-to-play review of the Yuletide Titan event. I did give you guys a little bit of a spoiler there because I already picked some void champions, so I will be pulling some void shards probably tomorrow at the time of this recording, just to see if we can get lucky with the Sulfurion. I had a long conversation with myself and some clanmates in our Discord, deciding between Warlord and Sulfurion, and I ultimately went with Sulfurion. I could describe that a bit more in tomorrow's video when we pull those shards, but we'll see if we can hit that 15x on Sulfurion. We'll see what happens. Let me know in the comment section down below what your thoughts are on the Yuletide Titan event. Are you a fan of the rewards? And of course, be sure to vote in the community tab poll about which milestone you are pursuing for yourself. As promised, and for any skeptics in the room, I'll pop it up on the screen now, but we did in fact make that donation to Movember for $80 to represent $2 for every subscriber that I gained for the entire month of November. So once again, thank you to all of you new subscribers. Welcome to the channel. Hopefully you enjoy the content. As always, if you did find this video helpful, then be sure to hit that like button down below. And of course, if you enjoyed the video, then be sure to hit that subscribe button for more content in the future, just like this one. Thanks for watching and have a good one.